of Inside Story, and thank you for watching. Do email us if you have anything to suggest for future editions at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for your time and your company. Bye for now.
Business Latest is brought to you by Catalum, the most efficient and environmentally friendly aluminium smelter. Business Latest is brought to you by Catalum, the most efficient and environmentally friendly aluminium smelter.
All sides, all views, all ways. Al Jazeera.
It's filled with surprises, yet with a touch of the familiar. It's all those things you imagined, and some you didn't. It intrigues and fascinates, and often delights. It's a story of the world, and it's one with many endings. The 5-star global network. Fly to over 90 destinations on board one of the world's youngest fleets. Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
On the next Riz Khan show, as speculation mounts over the return of ousted former President Aristide, we discuss Haiti's unexpected political twists. Riz Khan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
This is Al Jazeera.
Good to have your company. Warm welcome to this news hour, coming to you live from Doha with me, David Foster. And from Al Jazeera's news centres in Doha, London and Washington, D.C., these are the top global stories. Joined now by trades unions, thousands continue to protest across Egypt, accusing the government of lacking credibility.
I'm Lauren Taylor in London with all the top stories from Europe, including Berlusconi's sex scandal trial. A judge in Milan will now decide if Italy's Prime Minister should appear in court. And the snowy Serbian village and the stealth secrets. Could they have helped create China's latest warplane?
Growing discontent. A shooting incident in Lahore severely strains US-Pakistan ties.
And I'm Rosalind Jordan in Washington. The top story in the Americas, it's the economy. President Obama gets ready to send his budget to Congress while his top banker says the U.S. economy is still in trouble.
Night has fallen in Cairo and across Egypt, and thousands of people are continuing to gather, protesting about the country's government. And the mood is spreading. There are crowds now outside Parliament, soldiers on the inside. And trades union workers are also on strike, unhappy with their pay and conditions. While all this is taking place, a group known as the Wise Men's been trying to negotiate a handover of power within the government. One of them is Amr Hamzawi, Research Director and Senior Associate at the Carnegie Middle East Centre, and he told me the government's not giving the group any confidence.
The official position, be it from the Vice President or the Prime Minister's position, is that the President is going to remain in office until September, and that he continues to practice his authorities and that he is responsible for putting Egypt on democratic transition path, which is basically our main problem, guys, be it in our committee or in the Tahrir Square. It is unacceptable because we lack trust in Mr. Mubarak's commitment to political reform, and even more so after we have been seeing the first announced steps by the ruling establishment in the last days. These do not mount to a reform package. These are minor steps where we are hearing that the state of emergency would be pending the security situation in the country, where we are hearing that the parliament will not be dissolved in spite of the fact that it come of rigged elections, where we are hearing we are going to amend the constitution, but it's going to be to the new president in September to decide in which direction Egyptian politics will be going. These are not reassuring steps, and we lack trust in what the establishment is doing. And analytically, I see it as more of an attempt to consolidate the authoritarian system.
Let's talk to our correspondent, Ayman Mohyeddin, who's in Cairo. Does it sound these going anywhere? Ayman Mohyeddin's in Cairo. Does it sound, Ayman, as though these talks are going anywhere?
Well, you know, David, it does not seem like there's actually any progress right now in terms of where these talks are taking place on multiple levels, that within the actual protesters or those that are emerging as possible representatives on behalf of the protesters in Liberation Square, and the more established players representing the parties, representing the so-called Committee of Wise Men. You know, there's a huge stagnation right now because the government seems to be very entrenched in its positions about what is the right way forward. They're very keen on preserving this government, on preserving the regime by any means necessary. And what they're trying to do really is provide protesters with, you know, cosmetic changes, as the protesters have been describing them. The change in personalities within the ruling National Democratic Party, the changes in some of these key leadership positions within the cabinet, but nothing substantial so far about the structure of how Egypt is being governed. And I think that's why you're seeing this political standoff still very much not moving forward after nearly 3 weeks.
Ayman, the difficulty you explained to us earlier on about transferring, asking Mubarak to leave the country and resign as president, is that a stumbling block? Go into that again for us.
Absolutely. You know, it's being described, according to people that I've been speaking to, as the ace in President Mubarak's back pocket. It is a card that many are saying he is playing with the Western countries that, if you've noticed, they've essentially backed off a little bit from putting a lot of pressure on him to transition power immediately. And very briefly, what it is that if the president were to step down, constitutionally, he must pass powers on to the Speaker of the People's Assembly, or the parliament here, and that would be Ahmed Fathi Srour. In the event that he does so, the Speaker of the Parliament would have 60 days to carry new presidential elections. And in doing so, he must carry out the elections according to the current constitution without any changes to that constitution. Well, the problem with that is the way the current constitution is right now, the way it's written, is that in order to become a presidential nominee, you must have 1/3 of the vote of parliament. Well, the problem is the parliament now is 90% controlled by the ruling National Democratic Party. So in essence, it would only be them who would be allowed to nominate a presidential candidate in those 60 days. And what you would essentially have is another ruling party candidate. You would not have a pluralistic competition for the presidency. And essentially, that's what the president is saying to the oppositions. Look, you try to force me out of office, I'm going to play by the Constitution, and I'm going to give the power to the Speaker of the Parliament, and you guys will not be able to nominate any of these candidates that you want. So let me finish my term in office. Then in these 6 months, we can put through some constitutional reforms to allow multi-party candidates, and then you guys will be able to run for presidency in September.
Ayman, we're going to take a look at something that's been happening at Parliament, then I'd like to come back and ask you one more question. A number of protesters have gathered outside the Parliament building. This, of course, is Tahrir Square, Liberation Square. But at the Parliament building, we've got protesters on the outside and soldiers now on the inside. Jackie Rowland went to take a look.
The demonstrations are moving into a new phase. As you can see, the protesters are now venturing beyond Tahrir Square. Here they've come to the Parliament building, one of the symbols of power in President Mubarak's Egypt. There's a feeling that the politicians aren't listening to their message, so they've decided to bring the message to the politicians. The Parliament is packed full of members of President Mubarak's ruling National Democratic Party. The last elections were held in November and there were numerous complaints of electoral fraud. These people want the elections to be held again so that they can have a parliament that truly represents the people's wishes.
We are trying to move the demonstration to a new frontier. Now in Tahrir Square, they have already occupied Tahrir Square. Nobody can get them out from Tahrir Square. There is two ways to get them out from Tahrir Square. Either it's by listening to what they demands, or it's going to be a bloodbath.
The demonstration, as you can see, is quite well humoured, but the army isn't taking any risks. They're here in considerable numbers to make sure that nothing gets out of hand. But as you can see, they're not in any way trying to stop the demonstrators from bringing their messages to the Parliament. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Cairo.
Well, largely symbolic, that protest outside the Parliament building, because there are no parliamentarians there, Eamon. But what about the workers, the members of the trades unions who've gone on strike? Does that represent a change in the protest, or is it anything to do with the protest?
Well, absolutely. It'll be a very significant development if indeed the numbers of these workers from various industries and various sectors of Egyptian society continue to go on strike and the number grows. You know, when you talk about unions in Egypt, most of them are sanctioned by the state. In the past, they've been very much subjugated to the will of this state. For these employees that, you know, number in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions across the country, if they begin to mobilize in favor of the pro-democracy, anti-Mubarak protesters, if they throw their support and their weight behind it and they go on strike like we've begun to see in cities like Suez, Mahalla, in Cairo, Alexandria, this would be a very significant development because they represent such a cross-section of Egyptians' workforce. It would really bring the country to a standstill. One of the unions that is beginning to go on strike are those that work on the railroads, we are told, in the past couple of hours. So essentially, it would bring all of the train services in the country to a stop. And if those workers put their forces behind the pro-democracy camp, you are going to see this situation even get deeper in terms of the standoff between the government and the protesters.
Thank you very much indeed. Talking about a number of members of the trades unions who are on strike, let's talk to one of them, Faisal Lakusha, a technician at Mahalla Spinning and Weaving Company, the largest public sector textile company in Egypt. He joins us from Mahalla. Tell us, first of all, why you've gone on strike.